So you might be blinded by the whiteness of my flesh. So I do apologize for that. Otherwise, I am George Terran, and I am joined by the man, the myth, the traveler from a galaxy far, far away, Mr. Travis Croft. How are you, sir?
I am fine and dandy. I see our viewers tonight have been treated to a bit of a freebie, bit of a Christmas treat to two tickets of a gun show over here.
I'm shy now.
The question on everyone's lips is the same: is do you even lift, bro?
Obviously not.
But he's working on it. He is working on
it, damn it. 4 weeks in.
We have a pretty packed show this week.
Yeah, we do. We
have a lot of Marvel to talk this week.
Yeah. We've got a lot of revelations in the Marvel world. The biggest one of all of those is how does Can You Ever Forgive Me factor into the MCU? It's a really interesting prequel.
Indeed. How Lee Israel was ever going to be included in the Avengers, I didn't see that one coming.
That was a side spin. I mean, it's on Disney Plus, but
yeah, I mean, we should have seen it coming. But in Kevin Feige, we trust.
We've got so we're going to be talking chain movie of the week. Can You Ever Forgive Me? Obviously, going to be talking about Spider-Man: No Way Home. So there will be spoilers. We will put that note up on the screen. I will make a note in the notes so that people know what time we start talking about Spider-Man. So if you haven't gone and seen it, you can watch the rest, watch around, and then come back to it later on. Or you can just go and watch Spider-Man, just like the rest of the world, because you are in the minority from the sounds of it with the box office tickets they're taking. Goodness me.
It's endgame numbers is what they're doing right now.
Yeah, it's now the second biggest opener, I think, just behind Endgame. So it's like, damn, and this is just a Spider-Man movie. It's not a collection of 10 movies, 10 years worth of cinematic history, arguably longer, but we're going to be talking about the penultimate episode of Hawkeye. Travis is going to be talking about the new Sandra Bullock movie on Netflix called The Unforgivable. I will give just a little update on The Harder They Fall, which I started talking about last week, and the first few episodes of the new season of The Witcher. So we've got a few bits to talk about. So let's get right onto it. Where do we want to start, my friend?
Well, look, the big story this week is, of course, Spider-Man. As you just noticed, it's making all the monies. It's kind of the film du jour. We should just, so I think we just crack on with that to start with.
Okay,
so whack that spoiler warning right up there. And if you listen to the podcast, skip ahead and you can enjoy the rest of this hilarity and chaos later.
0 Spider-Man. Okay, and spoilers are up.
Go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We are spoiling this movie for you.
Yes.
Thoughts. Look, I love the film. I thought it was a lot of fun. It's the most fun Marvel film I think we've seen since Endgame. I think it was better than Far From Home, which I thought was probably the second most fun film they've done since Endgame, which in a way doesn't bode well for Marvel because nothing they've done or introduced since then has come close to their original product. So their post Infinity Saga material has been reasonably weak. Though Shang-Chi was okay, I hated the Eternals. Black Widow was awful. But that's getting negative. But that's in a way it's a good thing, but it's a worry at the same time. It's like it is, he is a legacy character from that original Infinity Saga, and you would hope that maybe something you've done since then might be standing up to this, but it doesn't. I was shocked at how popular Spider-Man is. I'm constantly shocked at how popular Spider-Man is.
I'm never genuinely surprised because despite what the last 10, 12 years may have kind of suggested to a lot of people, Iron Man was never the shining jewel of Marvel verse. He was like a low A tier, high B tier kind of character before.
He was a fairly obscure character before. Not quite Guardians of the Galaxy obscure.
No.
Yeah, I remember the comic books when I was a kid, but I never read them. Spider-Man was probably that and the Hulk, really. I mean, those were the ones that turned.
Yeah, you think about, the fact that Sony decided to not buy the rest of the Marvel stuff. They just bought Spider-Man and a few other bits. That's because Spider-Man has been the crowning jewel of the Marvel crown.
But I guess for me, I never really wanted to put it on a level with Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman. Those things always seems higher, the platinum tier characters. But I haven't heard cheering and whooping and hollering and and that kind of thing, a kind of noise from an audience since Endgame. And only in Endgame can I recall seeing that kind of noise in a cinema before. And it was all the way through the film, cheering and what you call it. It is, I guess it's a strange measure, but Australian cinemas are notoriously quiet, apart from fuckwits on their phone and people who bring children and don't tell them to shut the fuck up. If you're a parent, teach your child to shut the fuck up in the cinema. If they're sitting there asking questions during the movie, you ask one more question, then we're leaving. That's how you do it. Because the kid behind me kept talking all the way through the movie, and that was really annoying.
That's why you take a water pistol with you, spray them in the face.
Go no, because apparently parenting's hard. But you don't normally hear cheering and yelling and hollering and that kind of thing in the cinema. So there were at least 2 or 3 occasions where that happened in this film, and I was like, okay, that's very cool. But it's just sort of a strange sort of rant to start with, but geez, it was just fun, right? It was fun. There was no identity politics crammed into it, and I don't care what people say about it's not real or whatever. It's there. They're doing it. It's the message is in their films a lot, and I understand the reasoning why they want to do it, but they're usually fairly unsubtle, and it's unnaturally inserted, and it stands out like dog's balls usually. But that wasn't here. It was just, hey, let's make a fun movie about Spider-Man. It makes all the money. Crazy idea, right?
Yeah. And the key thing that I think they have remembered throughout the whole film is that it's a Spider-Man and Peter Parker movie. And so often, particularly like when you think of Spider-Man 3, the Sam Raimi version, you think of Tim Burton's Batman movies, and to a lesser degree, even the Chris Nolan movies and the Superman movies, they usually end up not actually being anything about the hero. And so often the hero is kind of somewhat forgettable compared to the villain, because the villain is the compelling one that causes the trouble and the hero has to overcome it. And we are bred into this idea that the hero is always going to win. But from the very first time that Tom Holland took on Spider-Man solo in Homecoming, there's that brilliant moment where the Vulture just collapses the building on him and he's crying like a young boy trapped, just going, help, please. That has always persisted. He's always been this young guy. And so there's never been this, we've always known that he's going to win somehow, but there's always been this vulnerability to him, and it's been about his journey. They've kept the focus on him, and that's great, especially in a movie where they've got so many villains.
You're right. They really get Peter Parker right. I mean, he struggles. He is a guy, he's constantly being berated by society, so I should talk about the plot if you don't know what it's about. Weird.
Spider-Man
takes up a job as a chimney sweep in medieval London. With Spider-Man's identity now revealed, Peter asks Doctor Strange for help. When a spell goes wrong, dangerous foes from other worlds start to appear, forcing Peter to discover what it truly means to be Spider-Man. And you really, we sort of noted at the end of the last movie, we have the introduction of J.K. Simmons again as J. Jonah Jameson. This time it's sort of an Alex Jones, agent provocateur, online journo, and calling him a menace, which was kind of missing from most of his first two Spider-Man solo films. The idea that he was put upon and being accused of being a menace and a terrorist and a villain himself, but that's back. We also kind of missed, I think, a lot of the struggle of being Peter Parker, but they kind of got right. At least I know for Toby Maguire films of like him constantly not having enough money for rent, having to be a student, trying to have a life, and trying to be a superhero at the same time, and just struggling to make all those ends meet. That was missing from the first two of these films. And he lived in a nice apartment with his Aunt May and had a rich friend in Tony Stark making suits for him, and
Mhm.
that kind of struggle streak kind of element of Peter Parker was missing, which I think they've really nailed this time in a sense. He's really up against it.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially how how it ends for him, and him just going into that little tiny apartment, and that's just where they leave the Peter Parker story. It's like, oh shit, okay, that's real. That's good. Well done.
If you noted as well, we're in spoiler town, so we have and it wasn't much of a spoiler because they're all in the trailer. The villains start to creep into this world. Include Dr. Ock, so we have Alfred Molina reprising his role. We have Willem Dafoe fucking stealing the show as Green Goblin again.
Yep.
We have Electro, played by Jamie Foxx, and the Sand guy who nobody remembers.
Sandman.
Yeah, who was he played by again? The guy who was in Sideways. I can't even remember his name.
Yeah. What's his name? Hang on. He's not very high on the list.
He's really not high up the list of billing.
Thomas Hayden Church.
Yes. And otherwise known as that guy from Sideways. I think he was in Ned and Stacy as well. So we have, of course, the Green Goblin / Willem Dafoe from the original Spider-Man film, Doc Ock from Spider-Man 2, Sandman from Spider-Man 3, the Raimi Spider-Man 3, and then we have Electro, who is in the Amazing Spider-Man 2, which was the second of the Andrew Garfield films. Yes. And they get them right.
And we also had, you're forgetting, Dr. Kirk Connors.
Of course. Very easy to forget who was, of course, the one for the first Amazing Spider-Man film. Because he's just sort of there, isn't he?
Yeah, and that's kind of what happens in the first one. Like, I went back and watched the Amazing Spider-Man 1. And he's just kind of there. It's like, all right, this is okay.
Paul played, of course, by Reese Evans, I think it was.
Yes.
So we have one villain from each of the previous 5 Spider-Man films, and through that same gap in reality with Doctor Strange opens, we get the 2 Spider-Men as well. We get, of course, the worst kept secret in the history of cinema, Toby Maguire and Andrew Garfield reprising their roles as the Spider-Men from their particular universes, and they all have to work together to defeat the villains. It's a pretty decent plot in the sense that Peter has an interesting motivation that he could kill these guys essentially by sending them back to their original universes to be killed fighting their original Spider-Man, but he decides to instead persist and try and cure them of these ailments that have caused them to become these villains. How did you find that motivation? I felt it was a little bit murky.
I liked it as an idea, and it definitely set up. It felt more in line with the way that Tom Holland's Spider-Man has been portrayed throughout all the MCU stuff. But at the same time, it just seemed so convenient, and it just kind of feels like it's painting the MCU, this prime universe, for lack of a better descriptor, 665 or whatever the actual designated number is, kind of feels like it makes it really, really more powerful than any of the other universes, because they were able to do it just with a Tony Stark machine, and you kept on having Electro guy just coveting the arc reactor and things like that. So like, okay, is the technology really that much more advanced? Because going off, I guess my big problem with the whole premise is there supposed to have been time that has is it I don't get what the time thing is there, because the villains, they each go through this moment where they're like, oh, I was just about to get all this power and then suddenly I was here, and they have difficulty remembering how they got here and what was happening next. They don't remember the point of their death. But obviously, when you look at the Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, they've very clearly aged. And the way that they talk to Peter about, like Andrew Garfield talks about how it took a long time for him to get over things that happened to him not mentioning the death of Gwen Stacy. So it sounds like he went off and had these adventures and became quite dark. I don't quite get where the timeline is.
They don't explain that very well. I think it's more noticeable that Toby Maguire is looking old.
Yeah.
And you're right, and he sort of talks about how he made it work with MJ. After it took a long time, but they made it work. But yeah, you don't never really quite explained why it is that these villains are sort of insinuated that they got picked up and moved here from their fights with those Spider-Men in the films that we've seen, whereas the two Spider-Man characters were transported here from some point in their future back to this reality.
Yeah.
And you're right. He dodges that very nicely because he just goes, "Hey, look over there. There's something shiny."
Yes.
Don't think about it.
It's all of the quibbles that I have with any of the story elements. It's surface level because they're dealing with multiple realities. Of course, it's going to get fucking messy straight away, but they still keep the ball rolling persistently. There's this just a persistent pace to the whole story that just keeps you going and never gets tiring. It never feels like you're going at 1,000 miles an hour. The one sequence that I do feel that they kind of spent a little bit too long on and rushed through it was Peter versus Doctor Strange. That was the one bit where it's like, okay, you're throwing a lot of visuals at me right now. Whew, okay. Slow down or shorten it. One of the two, please.
I didn't have a problem with that. The problem I had with well, not really any of the action sequences, but more so one of the storylines, is that Peter's kind of a whiny little bitch. Like, that's why this film happens. He's a whiny little bitch. And, interrupts Doctor Strange. Well, we've all seen the trailer, probably. He interrupts the spell, which causes it to go sideways. I'm like, he's not a fucking idiot, though, right? I mean, he's portrayed as being quite an intelligent guy.
Yeah.
So why would he start acting like a fucking idiot all of a sudden? Because that's kind of that's pure fucking idiocy what he did in that scene. You're like, he doesn't act like that before or after. It's just this plot needed that to happen. But minor quibble. Not really going to affect the story. The other part would kind of maybe go, so is Spider-Man not an Avenger anymore?
Well,
so just a detail for those who haven't seen the film and you don't care. At the end of the film, to wrap everything up and close all the big portals to other realities, Doctor Strange casts a spell again, so everyone forgets who Peter Parker is, including himself. And so there's the scene at the end where he visits Zendaya and Ned at the coffee shop she works at, and they don't remember who he is. Happy Hogan doesn't remember who he is. Of course, Aunt May got to give the Uncle Ben speech halfway through the film after being killed. So I'm wondering, does that mean basically Spider-Man is out of the Avengers now? Is this like...
well, not necessarily. It could be a scenario where Spider-Man is still part of the Avengers, but they just don't know who he is.
See, it's interesting. I'm not quite sure. It was a little unclear on this. Like, they're like, oh, everyone will forget who Peter Parker is. I'm like, so there's literally nobody on Earth who knows him anymore. And that seems to be the insinuation. Like, nobody on Earth knows who he is. They didn't seem to insinuate also that nobody seemed to know Spider-Man. But they knew Spider-Man was still a thing. So, because they were still talking about Spider-Man. The other thing it kind of made me think of, they didn't quite clear that with me, was the kind of kickoff point for this whole thing was footage from Jake Gyllenhaal's character, whose name escapes me right now, Mephisto from the last film, who videotaped himself saying, Peter Parker is Spider-Man and Spider-Man killed me. And he had that fake footage of Spider-Man fucking shit up. Did somehow Doctor Strange's spell remove this individual video from existence? Because like everybody knows Spider-Man still exists. They just don't know he's Peter Parker, except for this video is all over the world at some point, and no one actually seems to address the fact that that's still on YouTube, right?
Not Mephisto, sorry, Mysterio.
Mysterio.
Because Mephisto is actually this is essentially the setup for the storyline of what happens in the comic books, where Spider-Man makes a deal with the character Mephisto, so everyone forgets that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. and the ramifications it has on that. It doesn't break the multiverse in this way, but it kind of does, but it doesn't. So they are borrowing from that in some ways. I think it's almost an opportunity for them to just do their own soft relaunch and just kind of go, all right, we're now just going to cut to Spider-Man in the college years where we can have them re-meet Mary Jane or MJ, or we can introduce Gwen or whatever we like, however we want to go.
We're going to remake Revenge of the Nerds, but in the MCU. Yeah. Porky's meets Spider-Man.
It was going to be Porky's. I knew it. I was waiting for Porky's.
Or National Lampoons. I'm not fussy.
Animal House.
Animal House MCU. Someone is waiting to be done. I'm being a bit picky here, but that was just the first thing I thought of. Was like there was this video footage everywhere that proved who he was, and I guess his spell has just erased that from existence. I guess it's not a huge ask considering he's erased the memories of billions of people at the same time. I was sort of hinting at it before, but what was one of the really impressive things this film did was it really did the villains well, and you noted as well. We had a lot of villains in Spider-Man 3, and that kind of dragged that whole thing down massively. Yeah. And usually the multiple villains thing is kind of an excuse, as we couldn't really land on one, so we do two. Yeah. And this one, they really got them right. Like, I remember seeing the Electro footage of, Jamie Foxx in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and you're like, really? That looks fucking awful. They did it so much. He looks so much cooler in this one. Alfred Molina, of course, iconic as Doc Ock, and as you sort of noted, Willem Dafoe. Do you need to say more? The guy's a legend. He was amazing in the first Spider-Man film. Of course, the Sandman got some little bit cool shit, even though I couldn't remember the actor's name. He was just kind of there, but he was there more than Rhys Ifans' Lizard character.
Do you feel like they needed all of those villains, or do you think that was just them, Sony, who have since the first Spider-Man movie with Sam Raimi, they have been just salivating over the idea of getting the Sinister Six on screen, and this is the closest they're going to get to that for at least a while.
I don't think it hurt it. I mean, we could have probably done without Curtis Connors, but I think it is a nice nod to those previous films that we got to see, one of each of those. It made the right call by focusing on the most interesting three of those characters, of those villains, at least ridiculous. I mean, the Sandman's kind of a dumbass character to have anyway. So I don't think it was a problem.
Then Paul Giamatti as the Rhino.
But they're really into wine. That would be funny. I think it didn't bother me at all. I enjoyed it. It didn't, as I said, to the point where I completely forgot Curtis Connors was in it, and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that. I remember you and I saw the first Amazing Spider-Man film. What a missed opportunity those films were for Sony. If we learned anything in this film, is that Andrew Garfield would and could make an amazing Spider-Man. He was fucking great in it. No pun intended. He was great in this film. He was really funny, really charismatic, and you just look at that and go, with a decent writer and decent director, and being kept as far away from Sony as humanly possible, he would have made a really, really great Spider-Man. And maybe he would have been in the Avengers at some point. He really, he got hard done by the fact he had to appear in these Sony-only films.
I do feel like he was kind of given the best Spider-Man arc because of just the key emotional beats that he was able to have. He had that emotional reconciliation with Electro, Max, whatever his surname is. And that was good because that was part of Max's journey to being a villain, is the relationship that he had with Spider-Man. And so it was good to see that go. And then especially when he saves MJ in almost a shot-for-shot remake of what happened in Amazing Spider-Man 2, and him get that kind of cathartic savior moment, and he plays it so well, and it just, you can see the kind of the weight and the emotion behind him. He's a fantastic actor. I'm so looking forward to see. There's now a big call for people to go ahead and say, "All right, let's give him Amazing Spider-Man 3 now," because
no, he was great, and he would have been. It's sad that he didn't get to make the films. I would love to see him come back and do other things. Maybe a story about those years in the wilderness, Spider-Man Dark or something like that. But no, Sony need to be kept as. I know they own this property and they have creative control, but they need to keep it kept at arm's length from Spider-Man. I liked the second Venom film, but it's compared to this, it's not even in the same league.
Yeah.
It's like me diving off a diving board at a local pool and making it look good, as opposed to an Olympic diver, doing a 3-twist pike thing and entering the water without making a splash. That's the level of degree of difficulty of what they're trying to do here. Venom pulled off a super, super simple bomb into a local pool. Good for you, Sony. You can't handle being on the big look. No, I have no interest. I didn't see Amazing Spider-Man 2. It looked. I saw the trailers, and that's why I know Electro looked like crap. But I didn't actually see that. And I wonder if that was the same thing for a lot of people. We are getting to a truly ridiculous stage now in the MCU, where one of the big reveals and the first big clappy yelly moment in the film was the reveal of Daredevil being in the MCU. Is it Charlie Cox?
Charlie Cox, yes.
And I think there are a lot of people around me going, "Who's that guy?" I think Michelle might have said to me, "Who's that guy?" And Michelle, if you're watching and you didn't say it, I apologize. I think she did though. And she did it again when Jamie Foxx turned up. Who's that guy? Like, nobody saw Amazing Spider-Man 2. And not a whole lot of people watched. Not enough people anyway watched Daredevil to know who he was, unless you're a super fan. So you really have to be. People said to me, "Should I watch it?" I'm like, yes, it's awesome, but how up are you with your Marvel? And they're like, I see the occasional one now and then. I'm like, do you watch the TV shows? They're like, no.
Yeah.
And you're like, well,
we're reaching a point where, especially with how all of the Marvel Disney Plus shows have been a lot. One of their primary focuses has been set up for the next phase. This is all a big breath before they go into this multiverse of madness and all of that stuff. It's going to be really hard and to be able to pull all that together and have the emotional connection for the stories that continue on if you haven't watched everything. The amount of homework going into the next, whenever they do bring the Avengers together in whatever form they're going to be, there's a lot of baggage that they're going to carry along with them. That's a lot, and it's
bit like it's interesting. Like I remember when you see comic books when you're a kid, like half the reason I ever got into them is because they seemed impenetrable. Because there was this, decades almost of lore. I mean, at least decades, at least years of lore in dozens of books leading up to episode edition 72 in the Iron Man series of Iron Man. You're like, that means I have to read 71 books to figure out. I mean, they're comic books; they're not exactly Wheel of Time, but you have to get your hands on them, and read them, and to be able to really engage with what's happening now. So, if I didn't get on at the ground floor, I just didn't get on because it was too much work to get. And the films are starting to feel a little bit like that. Fortunately for them, people have been on board now for so long. That's a good thing. But if you're like a newbie, like if you're a clean skin, you're like, I've never seen any of the Marvel films, but I finally convinced I'm curious. You've got a lot of ground to make up.
Yeah. It feels like at the moment, across everything, the only real consistent kind of thread is Benedict Wong's. Is it Benedict Wong?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he plays Wong as Wong.
Yeah. I was just getting myself really confused there. He seems to be the through line. Like he was in Shang-Chi. He has a brief pop in No Way Home. He is he's obviously going to be in Multiverse of Madness.
Yeah.
he's got that. There's a scene in Shang-Chi where he's fighting the Abomination, which has arguable tentative ties to the rest of the Incredible Hulk stuff and kind of Thunderbolt Ross and things like that. So like, okay, is he the thread? Is he
he's
gonna
the new Nick Fury?
Yeah, is that what he is now? I'm like, okay, respect to him because I love Benedict Wong, but it's like I can't see where this is heading right now. Whereas when the MCU started off, we had Nick Fury and we had the shorts, which were really good little teasers for, here's a brief little shot of Hawkeye, or here's a little bit introducing the idea of Thor, and just that little tiny.
And they were planting seeds a long fucking time ago. If you remember, after Iron Man 3, we had All Hail the King, which is the Marvel one-shot, which had Justin Hammer and Trevor Slattery in it. And that was hinting at the existence of the 12 Rings, which came to life in Shang-Chi. That was probably, 7, 8 years, something like that?
Probably.
When was Iron Man? Anyway, it's got to be like at least 5 or 6 years minimum ahead of when they actually got around to making Shang-Chi. Yeah. Iron Man 3 was 2013. So it would have been briefly after that. So it would be almost 8 years ago now since All Hail the King was shot. And that then 8 years before the actual film came out, that paid it off.
Yeah. All Hail the King came out in 2014 as well.
7 years. So 7 years since the payoff. They waited to pay off.
Yeah.
Not a gag, but almost an Easter egg.
An addendum.
Nobody saw them because, like, where did you see them anyway? I don't even remember where they originally were posted. We had DVDs or something. Yeah,
they were on DVDs, and I think they ended up going online or something like that.
They're on Disney Plus now, but I don't know exactly where they were intended to go at the time. So that was an incredible level of detail and planning was going into things that far back.
Yeah, but the difference between the Easter eggs and the planting is those were maybe 15 minutes maximum at their longest, whereas they're doing the same kind of thing, but in TV shows where it's 6, 7, 8 episodes of 30 to 45 minutes long, which is that's a lot more content that you have to watch. As we've said before, they've pulled it off once, they can do it again.
And they're not pulling it off yet. I'm just saying that it is. I mean, I kind of wonder how it goes for people with kids, right? So this MCU's now been going for 13 years. So if you were 5 or 6 in 2008, you've probably been on board. But if you were born in 2008, you're probably just about old enough now to start watching all that stuff, and probably the last couple of years. But like when we were kids, right? If you want to get catch up on Star Wars, there were 3 films.
Yeah.
Caravan of Courage, if you were lucky. Maybe Battle for Endor, if you were really feeling it. If you had a lot of money and time to kill, you could watch the holiday special, but it wasn't required viewing. So that's 3 films, maybe 5, but 2 of them non-canon. Now you've got 20 or 30 films and 5 or 6 TV series, not including the Netflix series,
which are now canon.
Kind of canon, at least. Daredevil is.
Because of 2 things. I mean, you've got Charlie Cox in Spider-Man and going into Hawkeye. Are you up to date with it?
I am up to date. I started watching episode 6 before we started now.
Yeah. So there's the freeze frame shot of Vincent D'Onofrio as Kingpin. Like, okay, so that's canon, but by pure definition, does that mean that the rest of them are all canon as well?
I mean, I think they're going to be picky. I don't see them going out of their way to make Iron Fist canon. I mean, that sucked. But it would be nice while they're bringing back awesome villains. Feel free to bring back David Tennant as Kilgore. Is it Kilgore? Jessica Jones. Kilgrave, sorry. And Jessica Jones was amazing too. Luke Cage was okay. That would be awkward because it had Mahershala Ali in it, and he's of course now Blade. But yeah, it's a lot to catch up. As I was saying, it's not a bad thing in the sense it's a lot. Most of it's very good.
Yes.
So
just a lot.
just a lot. And I wonder if it puts people off now if you're not 100%, which is a minority, because obviously most people are. But if you're not up to date with it, it's a barrier to entry.
Now, let's go back to and focus more on Spider-Man again. What were your thoughts on Ned being able to start doing magic?
I assumed it was just because he was wearing that ring.
That's my thought, but I went back and last night I rewatched Doctor Strange, and he talks about his nan saying, "Oh, you've got the magic in you," and stuff. It's like, okay, because it seems like even for someone like Doctor Strange, it took him a lot of time and effort and understanding to get to that point.
The difference there is Ned had the magic in him, and Doctor Strange had the music in him. It's a completely different thing. So,
to some people, music is magic.
So look, I didn't bother me. Like, obviously, it's one of those things the plot needed to happen. So I was fine. I just figured that's why I grabbed the ring, was just kind of so to make that a little bit more believable.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's like a turbo booster for your internal magic.
Because it just makes me wonder, like, oh, so could
anyone can do it? If you gave a little ring, you can do the.
There's a ring of power. I guess for me, the one thing that I do feel was, even though they did a really good job with what they had, I kind of felt like Mary Jane or MJ. Sorry, I keep on calling Mary Jane, but she's not Mary Jane. She's Michelle. She was a little bit left out.
She was a bit of a just on the side. I mean, but I don't know what else she's there to do. I mean, I would be very cool moving forward if we got a Spider Gwen. I don't know if there's a storyline where MJ becomes Spider powered or not. I would imagine there probably is. There's a lot of this. There's a lot of lore. But yeah, for such a formidable actor as Zendaya, and a really strong character in the previous films, it would be nice if she had a little bit more agency. But there's a lot going on in this film. So as you know to note, there's only so much time and space for people to do. Even some of the higher profile villains didn't get a lot of work to do. Are just sort of there. So I mean, a little bit. It didn't bother me. I'd be interested in female audience members if they kind of felt like they were shortchanged a little bit there, if they wanted to see a little bit more from her. But I don't think so. At least not my audience. They seemed extraordinarily satisfied with what they got.
Because I mean, just on a pure basis, it's a very male-heavy movie, and it's kind of refreshing difference for what Marvel have been throwing at us, particularly with something like this being the next movie off the rank after the Eternals, where we commented and said how it was very good on its representation and balance overall, and not actually just using it too much as just, oh, aren't we being progressive? It was interesting to kind of go back to back 15 years to a time where it's like, oh yeah, token woman. It just kind of felt a bit strange to me. Like they could have instead of having all of those classic characters come back, they could have, instead of having Rhys Ifans' character, for example, they could have brought in the female version of Doc Ock or someone like that from a different universe, just as a little tease for something in the future somewhere else. Just like, okay, that's fine. Maybe they didn't happen to, like when Ned's trying to accidentally gathers all of the Spider-Man, we could have just seen a moment where he's sort of like creates one and you just see the outline of another Spider-Man just wandering around the city who's been pulled in from that same universe, but he doesn't come through. So it's just that annoying teaser. So like, fuck, I think that was Miles Morales or something like that.
I mean, there were nods there, and it was like, I think at some point someone says maybe there'll be a Black Spider-Man one day.
That leads me to my other thing, okay? This movie breaks its own rule. So in this, Doctor Strange says, it's bringing all the people that know Peter Parker is Spider-Man through. It's like, okay, that's your premise. That's how you're setting up that line. Electro never knows, And Electro comments that he never knew up until Peter Parker reveals himself there. So why the fuck is he there?
It's a good question. I didn't see that film, so I didn't know that. So don't let logic get in the way of a good story.
It's just it's just frustrating when you have rules and then you break them.
Fortunate that no one saw that film, so almost and even nerds will know. No one cares. But interestingly, I noticed that film is trending on Netflix now. Like people are going, hang on a second, who was that guy? And I've gone home and watched it. Go, oh, that guy. I think this is a good entry. And you make a good point. It is a bit different, and I sort of noted it. It doesn't have that identity politics just crammed in like a Christmas turkey. It's like full of identity politics in there, or just stuff that doesn't look like it fits. Window dressing. That wasn't here, and it is a little bit surprising, after what they've been doing recently, that they go back and such an old-fashioned, if you call something from 10 years ago, old-fashioned style Marvel film. But isn't it funny? It worked, and it worked better than anything else they've done since Endgame. So they've got a lot of work to do to try and they want to put the message into their films, which is fine. But you got to do it successfully, because otherwise it really stinks. So interestingly, they got the message part right in the Eternals. It was just the rest of it that sucked. Yeah. So now if you can do that part with the good stuff, then you'll be rolling in it, because you'll keep everybody happy that way. Yeah. I'm glad they're still ballsy enough to pull off a film that's a traditional fun superhero film. And honestly, it's probably films like this that pay for films like the Eternals for now. Yeah. I don't know if the Eternals lost money. I can't say. It probably did, just because of it. Probably just because of a pandemic, if nothing else. Like cinemas are still not quite there, and I don't know that people were willing to take the risk to go out and see this unknown property. Whereas obviously people love Spider-Man, so they have gone out to see that in their droves. But
so the budget was 200 million for Eternals, box office 400 million. So that is not a success.
Just breaking even at this point in time, if at all. So, but again, that's pandemic time, so it might be different in a world where people felt safe to go to the cinema. These are the kind of films they're going to pay for their more adventurous journeys into representation. Do you see space? So Tom Holland has said he's going to play Spider-Man for the continuing time. I think he signed on for another trilogy.
Kind of. Like I saw that he's been signed on, but at this moment he doesn't know what the future is of Spider-Man. He's saying stuff like, I feel like I've done everything I can with Spider-Man, so I don't know whether he's going to kind of take a sidestep and they're going to deviate and introduce another.
So is it time then for a Miles Morales or a Spider-Gwen in the main? But also, I had read, and this is in a trivia on IMDb, which is of course an unassailably good source, that he had Tom Holland had to broker peace between Marvel and Sony to a degree. And that by signing on and making this deal, sort of coordinating this deal, he will appear in both MCU and Sony Spider-Man properties.
Yeah, I can believe that. Just going back to box office successes, No Way Home has been out for 3 days, 4 days. That had a budget of 200 million, same as Eternals. Its current box office is sitting at 638 million.
So that's already made a lot of money, and it's going to crack $1 billion. And you'd probably think it's, we see pandemic times, things aren't going great on the unspecified virus of unknown origin front. So maybe it won't quite hit Endgame numbers, but that Marvel's going to be very happy with those numbers.
Oh yeah.
I was going to say, we should probably try to wrap this up. What did you think of the Venom post-credit scene? I was mega disappointed.
I don't know if I was disappointed. I expected it, honestly. And I did kind of appreciate the because is that those movies and the way that they're presenting the character is a little bit more kind of Deadpool-y in its kind of almost like tongue-in-cheek kind of attitude to it, especially how everything ended in the Let There Be Carnage. It's like, okay, that's fine. Venom knows about the multiverse. That's cool. And that's confirmed in this, and it's a bit more of that odd couple thing that they've been doing for the Venom movies so far. I don't really know what I wanted. Like, I definitely didn't want Venom to be a villain in this, or the anti-hero in this at all. I don't know if they needed it, but I think that Sony really wanted it, because looking at the latest trailer for Mobius, they've got Michael Keaton reprising his role of the Vulture. And because that's Spider-Man, I think they're really trying to kind of pull all their wagons in a little closer than they may necessarily be entirely comfortable with on a business side to the MCU. So yeah, they kind of pushed this in a little bit, but
I was excited by it, because if we're going to set him up as some sort of anti-hero, I mean, also he also breaks the rule, by the way. The idea that Venom was pulled into this universe doesn't make any sense, because Venom doesn't even know Spider-Man exists, let alone who Peter Parker is. So that also doesn't make any sense with the rules that they set up. But they set him up. We have one brief credit scene, like where he acknowledges that, the Infinity Saga happened, and then he's gone, and they leave that little bit of symbiote at the end, which is probably going to set up for the villain, you'd think, or the antagonist, at least, of the next Spider-Man film. And I'm like, oh, well, that's super disappointing. I mean, why bring Tom Hardy into this universe if you're not going to use him? Like, I said, I didn't need him in the fight scene. I just maybe, he walks in and has a coffee next to Spider-Man or Peter Parker or something. I'm like, I want him and Tom Holland on screen together.
Yeah, it kind of sucked a little bit the same way when they got Evan Peters into WandaVision, and just that complete and utter red herring for the Quicksilver characters. Like, oh, fuck you. Just fuck you. No, Evan Peters was universally the better of the Quicksilvers. You could have just brought him in. You could have just done that. If you're building to the multiverse of madness, why not? Why not? Sure. I would have been happy with any explanation you would have made. And then you could have just used the same thing for Tom Hardy coming in as well. So like, sure, cool, boom, done. But
we've done 47 minutes on this film. This isn't the Spider-Man cast. We should probably move on if you've got nothing else major you want to observe about it.
No. I mean, we've been very critical about the movie, but it's really good.
I mean, I've been nitpicky because the subject matter is difficult, but they handle it beautifully. It's a bit like if you decide to nitpick Back to the Future, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But it's an amazing film. So you don't think about it until you watch it the 400th time. And, you go, oh, hang on a second. But, Spider-Man is a great film. If
it's really awesome. It's really fun.
Tangentially up to date, go see it.
Yeah. And the big win for me is this goes through a lot of story, but it doesn't feel overly long. It doesn't feel like they rush it too much. It's really well paced. They use the time that they have intelligently. So thank you for the editors on this film, because you did well.
If you're going to do a 2.5-hour film, you got to earn it. And Spider-Man, sorry, Eternals, it earned it. You didn't.
Yeah, exactly.
Should we talk about the next Marvel thing just quickly? While we're on the topic, you mentioned it earlier. Hawkeye had a bit of we hinted at it last week, but episode 5 was supposed to have this big mind-blowing moment for the MCU. And we got it at the end of the episode. And George stole our thunder, and he gave it away. But at the end of the episode, we find out that Kate Bishop's mother is a person who's hired Yelena, the Black Widow's Natasha Romanoff's sister, to kill Clint Barton. And she is working with Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin. I was like, oh, that's a nice little twist.
Yep. It's, again, I feel like it's been spoiled because it was kind of expected.
It was rumored, wasn't it? It was rumored he was coming back.
And I feel like Marvel needs to really get a leash on those, because if I had not had that rumor out there, if I'd not heard about that, that would have been fucking awesome, because I love the first Daredevil season. The second one was still really good as well. And Vincent D'Onofrio as Kingpin was absolutely crucial for the quality of that series. And so suddenly having him in here was awesome, really awesome. But it also kind of struck me as a little bit of, all right, we've been meandering through a TV show that is at a level of, I'll have that on in the background while I do something else, to suddenly having that kind of interest engagement. It's like, oh, really? Now I feel like I've got to rewatch the whole fucking thing in advance of the finale, just because, did I miss something? And I want to just enjoy the finale, and it's just frustrating.
It's a strange reaction. I did not feel the need to go back and rewatch anything. I very rarely do I drop hints. Like, I think I rewatched the season of most of WandaVision to see if they dropped hints about Agatha being Agatha all along. And I don't think they did. No. So I don't feel particularly strongly about that. I was just like, well, I'm just glad that, you know, we've said it endlessly on the show that Marvel are not overwhelmingly blessed with great villains. You know, that's DC's world. They've got great villains, shitty heroes. Vice versa over here, and they've kind of made do with some very generic antagonists in their films.
Yeah.
But ironically, two of the best ones they had were in TV. Their Netflix shows.
Yeah.
In Wilson Fisk's character here, played by Vincent D'Onofrio, and as I sort of hinted at before, Kilgore, played by David Tennant, was sick. Kilgrave, sorry, in Jessica Jones. But the movies that we've kind of been stuck with Thanos and Loki as the only decent villains. So you've got someone that's in your Netflix series. You bring them in, right?
100%.
Why waste them?
And I just kind of wish that they would have had, like, I Armchair produced it last week with the idea of them kind of interspersing Clint Barton as Ronin, going through his grieving of vengeance phase, and then having the gangs that he was taking out coming in. If they had gone that route, they could have just peppered in a little bit more of the Wilson Fisk thread, just a little more organically, rather than just thinking back on how he's been talked up and kind of this looming figure throughout the Hawkeye show. It's kind of felt a little bit of a nod and a wink to the audience each time. It's like, oh, the characters don't know, but you know, don't you? Yeah, you.
I didn't. I just saw it. I think I saw it in the news for the first time somewhere last week. I hadn't seen it coming at all because I don't read that much about it.
Just their language of kind of saying, oh, the big guy, the one the mastermind of it all and stuff. It's like, okay, you're talking about gangs in New York.
You have to remember your superpower. You spoil these things for yourself.
No.
It was a surprise to me, and I was like, oh, okay, that levels, because I did see, like I said, I saw a headline on Facebook or something last week saying that Vincent D'Onofrio might be coming back into the MCU. Otherwise, I had no idea that he was going to be in this series, and I really wasn't paying that much attention to who the character might be, Mr. Big. I was just like, honestly, I thought it was Yelena probably for most of it, but I thought it was going to be one of those sort of, oh, it's not a Mr. Big after all. Haha, you're a sexist. I started watching the first 10 minutes of episode 6, the finale, just before the show, because it drops. The new episode awkwardly drops about 7 p.m. or so Australian time, and so we don't get to finish it usually before the show. So you'll have to shoot in next week, or next week, or probably whenever we're going to be on next week, because it is the festive season.
Yeah.
But you have to tune in next time to see what we think of it. But I was impressed with the first 10 minutes.
Okay. Cool. Because I understand that it's an extended finale.
It goes for about an hour.
Yeah. But, okay.
I think it's still, frankly, for me, it's good. It's fine.
that's what I've been kind of feeling is like, all right, this is good. And the fight sequence between Maya and Ronin was good. It felt like one of the better fight sequences. I feel like they've done actually quite a good job of having I've said it a couple of times already, but the odd couple feel of Kate Bishop and Clint Barton coming together and having arguments and separating and things. I feel like that's actually growing to a nice spot where potentially if Clint Barton dies in this, kind of paying for his sins or whatever, it will, by that point, I will have felt like Kate would have earned that emotional moment, and it being that kind of with great power comes great responsibility level moment in the hero's life, which really forges them in the fires of heroics. So, hope so.
Hope so.
Not necessarily for the death of Clint Barton, but
we know that Ren is done, though, right?
Yeah, I think so.
So
they want a change. They're doing a changing of the guard, essentially. So,
but I guess the tension here is: does he die? Or does he fade into the night a la Cap in Endgame? No, I don't think I will. Does he become, a mall Santa Claus somewhere instead? Maybe finally have that crossover between the MCU and Bad Santa we've all been asking for.
I thought you were going to say the MCU and Jingle All the Way.
There is a superhero angle to that, if I recall correctly.
I know, yeah, there is.
Have we got time for our sponsor break of the evening?
Yeah, I think we have. Yeah, well, we have to legally.
Legally, exactly. The court's ordered it, and you have to endure it.
So 57. Okay, cool. All right, so we are on to sponsors.
And sponsor this week is Christmas.
Christmas, just the generic Christmas.
Just a generic holiday. It's going to be great.
This Christmas, you won't be the only one eating top-quality Bilo Christmas turkey. $4.99 a kilo. Have a great Christmas from Bilo, cheap groceries.
The joy of giving, the celebration of Christmas. And at David Jones, you'll find an extra special range of Christmas gift ideas, like the powerful Braun Multi-Quick Hand Blender. It beats, it purees, it whips, it chops, and it makes a perfect Christmas gift. Oh, and it comes with a bonus Braun kitchen scale. That's your exclusive gift from David Jones until Christmas. Especially Christmas, there's no other store like David Jones.
Love is just around the corner. Hurry into Goldmark right now. With the best prices guaranteed on a great range of rings, earrings and pendants and a fantastic selection of watches, you just can't beat Goldmark for the perfect Christmas gift. Goldmark, just around the corner. Merry Christmas. Goldmark.
This Christmas, you'll receive fantastic trade-in deals at Radio Rentals. On Sony TVs, $120 for your working colour TV. On all frost-free fridges, $130. On hi-fis, $90. Radio Rentals for the best trade-in deals this Christmas.
You're my favorite, Dick Smith Electronics.
This Christmas, there are gifts for all the family at Dick Smith Electronics. How about something for a promising rock star? Or perhaps a play-as-you-learn computer as the go. Nick and Sally could have hours of fun with these walkie-talkies, wherever they are.
You're my favorite, Dick Smith Electronics.
Happy Christmas to all from Dick Smith Electronics.
That was big dick for you, ladies and
If you were looking for some dick this evening, you're welcome. And the puns are just gonna keep coming.
I see what you did there.
I'll be here all week. Try to reveal.
Now then, Travis, do you want to talk about The Unforgivable?
I will talk about it quickly. I gave it a heads up last week. We were going to talk about it last week. We just ran super long and didn't have time to cram it in. This is a new Netflix exclusive film starring Sandra Bullock. It is based, I think, on a documentary. A woman is released from prison after serving a sentence for a violent crime and re-enters a society that refuses to forgive her past. Pretty high-profile cast here. As you sort of noted, Sandra Bullock, Academy Award-winning Sandra Bullock, plays Ruth Slater. We have Viola Davis. We have Vincent D'Onofrio, who we just talked about playing Kingpin. John Bernthal is also in this. That's probably your lot. It's for the big names. As we sort of note, we meet Ruth. She's being released from prison. She was in prison for a significant period of time for shooting and killing a police officer who was attempting to evict her from her house, her and their little sister from her house. After she was sent to jail, she was her sister's carer. Her sister is hence adopted out to a fairly middle-class, well-to-do family and doesn't remember her sister at all. Well, I think she knows she's adopted. She doesn't have, her adopted parents don't tell her who her sister is. And we sort of have this two-track story running here between seeing sort of Ruth attempting to reintegrate into society with mixed results at the same time as trying to track down some information about where her sister is so she can get in touch with her and potentially see if there's any potential, any chance of sort of rekindling their relationship, if you will. Rekindling's not the right word, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And it kind of pulls off all right.
Okay.
The real strength of this film is Sandra Bullock, in that she is... Look, people shit on Sandra Bullock a lot, and her winning that Oscar for The Blind Side, and it's a controversial film for a host of different reasons, which I won't go into today. And whether or not she deserved it or not, is it a Gwyneth Paltrow award? Probably not. She's not much better actress than Gwyneth is. And she's certainly... she's got a real presence on screen. And for me, what I liked about her in this film is she plays a very un-Bullock-like role. We saw her as the sort of mama bear, protective parent in Bird Box. What a stupid name for a film that was. I should have come up with something better than that. But, and yeah, Bird Box was all right. But this is a real different character for her. She's got a real hard edge to her. As you can imagine, someone who's been in prison for, I think it was 10 to 15 years sort of time frame, you're going to have to survive that. You're going to have a real edge to you. You're going to have a real crusty exterior, You're going to be a hard individual.
Yeah.
And that's who she portrays here. And so that is not something we normally see from Sandra Bullock as an actress. And I found that part of the story about her trying to reintegrate into society fascinating, actually, and quite interesting because obviously I've never been to jail that you know about.
I'm not allowed to work with criminals.
Well, what's a criminal?
Any Australian, you're all thieves.
Them's fighting words. So, but the idea of it, especially, I don't know, I certainly can't comment in Australia because I'm not particularly au fait with the criminal justice system. I tell a story about to my friends about one of my personal encounters with the justice system a few years ago, where someone I know had a hearing, and I had to go talk to their lawyer about bail. And I said, "How much does bail cost for someone?" And she's like, "Oh, you don't pay for bail in Australia. This is in America." And then I suddenly realized that everything I knew about the justice system came from Law and Order.
Yeah,
and didn't apply. And Australia, completely different, So, but I feel like, especially in the States, and probably to a degree here as well, if you have a criminal record, it's incredibly difficult to reintegrate into society. You're very, very difficult to get a job as a convicted felon. Again, I think probably more so in the States than here. So, this whole culture of, you do your time and, do your time for your crime and, then you're back out to society. And we're all like, well, fuck you, right? You're a criminal. I'm not hiring you. Like, I mean, to a degree, you can sort of understand, like, you want that person around you, but at the same time, what are we actually pushing these people towards? Like, if you're saying you committed a crime, you're going to make it really difficult to get a job when you get out of jail.
Yeah.
What are we actually? Are we really going? Yeah, are we not pushing them back towards a life of crime?
Exactly.
And then if they go and commit another crime, we're going, oh, well, you see, you're just a criminal, and this is what you do. When potentially this is the only, we've kind of pushed them into it as a society by going, it's really hard. We're not hiring criminals. Yeah. And in this instance, she plays a cop killer. So that's kind of a double down as a, I mean, probably in Australia too, but obviously there aren't very many of those here. Police officers don't get killed on the job terribly often, fortunately, here. So being a cop killer in the States has that extra stigma on her. So it's, she see her going for jobs and people going, we won't have you here because, someone's been in touch with us and told us who you are. The other subplot running through here is the children of a police officer she killed, and their reaction to her being released from prison, which I won't spoil in case people want to see it. And that one's probably the least successful.
Okay.
In the sense, it just kind of goes in a direction you're like, oh, that doesn't feel very realistic to me. Okay. It just kind of feels like it's been put. I'm trying to spoil it for people, but it just kind of takes the film into a realm in which it doesn't feel comfortable. The middle plot, being her trying to catch up with her sister, is moderately successful. So this is where Vincent D'Onofrio and Viola Davis come in. They have purchased the house in which Ruth and her sister were living in, which the crime took place in. And she finds her way back there to see if she can get, if the people who live there can tell her anything about, where her sister is, I think. And it just turns out that Vincent D'Onofrio is a really good lawyer and a really nice guy who decides to help her out and try and get her in touch with her sister again. You're like, but he's in a very, very small role. I mean, we're talking 15 minutes of screen time, maybe 20. Viola Davis as well, very, very little screen time. Again, you're probably talking 20, 25 minutes of screen time for her, and she's just sort of there. I'm like, what? You've got Viola Davis and Vincent D'Onofrio in this film, and you use them incredibly sparingly. Like, what a waste. John Bernthal, an even smaller role as a potential love interest of Ruth. And I think John Bernthal doesn't get enough credit. I think he's actually a really decent actor. I particularly liked him in Baby Driver.
Actually.
So he, again, real talent profile, and you just don't use him very much. I mean, it seems a strange choice from the director. It's interesting. This is one of those films that divides the audience and the critics. The critics has a Metascore of 41 on IMDb. It has a score of 7.2. So the audience are preferring this to the critics. I enjoyed it. I've been a little critical of some of the subplots. Not really. I don't think any of it really quite reaches the crescendo it could have, because they're trying to do three different things at once, where maybe they should have picked the lane.
Do you think it's a failing of the director or the writer? Because I'm looking at who the director and writer are, and I don't know the director's work at all. It's what's her name?
Nicole.
Nora Flingstead.
I think she's a documentary filmmaker. I think this is maybe one of her first films in Hollywood, for want of a better term.
And the kind of the big screenwriter contributor for this is a guy called Peter Craig, who wrote the screenplay for The Town, which was really good. He's got a writing credit for The Batman, which is coming out and getting some very early buzz. He did The Hunger Games, Bad Boys for Life. He's kind of all over the shop with some of the few screenwriting credits that he's got, but it kind of, just looking at some of the things that he's been involved with, it kind of sounds like there's three different story tracks that you were talking about kind of coming in here. Like one he maybe dedicated a bit more time to for Sandra.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a Sandra Bullock vehicle. I mean, this is this is the second one of these she's made for Netflix. Obviously, we talked about Bird Box, which is a Netflix exclusive as well. But if you got a name like that, and while I was critical of it, overlooking some of those other actors, she's undeniably a bigger name than all of them.
Yeah.
So, but this is what I said it was based on the documentary. I was wrong. In fact, it was based on a British miniseries, a 3-part miniseries, which kind of fits, right? 3 parts, 3 stories. And so I don't know how long the British, quickly have a look, for 2009. So it was before you came here, but so you might have watched it, but who knows?
I think I did.
2 hours and 15 minutes the 3 episodes go for. So I got 2 hours, 15 minutes to tell those stories, which is a bit more time, I think, than this film has to work with. I think it's a bit shorter than that. It was actually, it went out about 5 minutes shorter. So, I feel like you got a little bit more space in a miniseries to tell a 3-track story like that, as opposed to a 1 hour, 50-minute feature length sort of presentation. It doesn't hurt it in a critical way, in a sense. It's not fatal. It's fine to watch. I actually found myself quite enjoying it. I found myself engaged, and I wasn't distracted too often, and I was quite glad to see it was over in 2 hours and not 2.5 hours, like everybody else does these days. But at the same time, you kind of walk away and going, oh, okay. That was okay, I guess. A little bit empty, not quite, because it didn't quite, as I said, stick the landing on any one of those 3 sort of tracks it was working on. Whereas I think if it maybe cut one out, or maybe ended one halfway through and spent the rest of the film with the other 2, and they could have given them the time they needed to really lead towards a meaningful ending. I think the director has serious potential. I liked it quite a bit. If you've got Netflix, it's well worth a watch. It's not exactly uplifting viewing, I can't say that much, but it raises some interesting questions, and if it raises that conversation you have with people and go, well, how do we treat people who just got out of prison? Could we do that better? Would that lead to better outcomes if we didn't demonize people who just got out of prison and go, well, you're a fucking felon, so we're not giving you a job? What if we made it easy for them to get a proper job and reintegrate back into, what we consider, normal life, as depressing as it may be? It's preferable to the alternative.
Yeah. I mean, just exactly when do you stop paying for your crime?
That's the question, and I thought that was the most compelling part of his story. The rest of it, not so much. The adoption part was interesting. I don't know too many people who are adopted, and it kind of raised a conversation point in my head going, well, what would I do in that scenario? But the third one was just silly. And the third one of the brothers trying to find out where she was living and stuff. And you're like, come on, guys. No, thank you.
Okay. All right. But overall, you'd recommend it?
I liked it. It was an enjoyable 2-hour film. As I said, interesting, well acted. If you like Sandra Bullock, even better. And it's, like I said, it's on Netflix, so you're already paying for it. And compared to most of the dross that comes out of Netflix these days, it's pretty good.
That's fair. All right. I'm just going to finish off my thoughts on The Harder They Fall, if that's okay.
By all means.
Yeah. So I talked to my early thoughts about the first half of this, again, Netflix special. I think it was actually also released into some cinemas. The lead star of it is Jonathan Majors, who is shooting up in fame because he's part of the MCU as Kang. He was in the Lovecraft series as well, Lovecraft Country, which I really, really enjoyed. I thought he was great in that, and he's fantastic in this. We've got Zazie Beetz. Who else have we got in there? There's one of the Wayans brothers is in there. You've also got Regina King, who is awesome in this, actually. We have also got the ever brilliant Delroy Lindo and the big guy himself, Mr. Idris Alba. And my God, this is a cast that know their strengths. And I talked about how they really integrated and utilized the fact that it's an all-black cast, bringing that and informing on the story and the time, because cowboy movies, inherently, you automatically kind of think of John Wayne and Clint Eastwood, and it's very, very white. And it's like, well, actually, no, this was a really interesting point in history, And they use that to tell a compelling story in this. And they keep that going throughout the whole thing. It's really good. And the build up to it all, the end is, my curse strikes again. I guessed how it was going to end, and I was right. But it was fucking enjoyable. They put the legwork in for the first half of it, and they kept that pace going. The story becomes a bit predictable at the end, but I forgive it because, my God, these actors are just having fun with the role. It's dark. There's that kind of like Tarantino kind of pulpy kind of vibe to the way that it's directed and edited. The sound is really good. Every personality on that screen is just giving you every part of this character. They are just exuding the characters so well. Zazie Beetz and Regina King have this great couple of scenes together that is just awesome. It's just these two badass bitches just knowing their power, knowing that, having this confidence that when the way that you've been introduced to them throughout is like, oh yeah, you've seen some shit and you've done some shit, but they never spend ages kind of diatribing soliloquies about how hard it was and all this stuff. And when they do have that one moment, Regina King just reveals this story that is fucking brilliant. It's just beautifully done. That being said, for anyone who, like you said last week, you're not a big fan of Westerns, this is a dyed-in-the-wool Western. Every trope is on display here, but it's done really well. I would urge you to try it, but if you don't vibe with it within the first 10 minutes, just jump, because it hits the ground running. And if you're not enjoying the ride within the first 10 minutes, you're not going to enjoy the rest, because these guys just go with it and they go with the flow. It's wonderful. I would urge everyone to watch it if you are a fan of Westerns, because this is gritty without being dark and so bitter in its way. Like, you think of something like Unforgiven, and how gritty that showed its world, and all of the guys were just old cowboys and they were bitter and they hated the world and everything. These guys have got an axe to grind against the world for legitimate reasons, for many legitimate reasons, but it's always done with this air of, this is a movie, we're entertaining you. It's just really well balanced. I'm really, really pleased that this movie has come out, and it's sitting on a 6.6 for IMDb and 68 Metacritic. I think those are a bit low. I would happily put this, personally, I would give this a rating of an 8. Just really enjoyable, really just grabbed me by the balls, and I've been thinking about it a lot in the last week and a half. So yeah, it just struck me really well. It's just a movie that I was like, yeah, hey, this is doing everything I want a movie to do. Thank you.
High praise indeed.
Yeah.
An 8 out of 10. That's a strong recommendation.
Yeah, I think it's great. I really do. So yeah, I just wanted to finish off and just.
I should note that, like, I'll acknowledge something that's wrong with me, but if I get something, it's a bit like we talked about musicals last week. It's like I see something as a musical, I'm instantly kind of going, I'm not really into this. Mm-hmm. And it really takes something decent to overcome that hurdle. And I think you know what I mean. Occasionally, with something just rubs you the wrong way, it's like, Charlie Brooker and you don't get along.
Yeah. Me and Ricky Gervais. Oh.
Everybody and Tom Cruise. So, like, I actually did get around. It's just I don't think anyone's terribly interested. I watched as much of Hamilton as I could. And that got me within 35 minutes of the end before the songs were giving me a headache. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm out. But so it would be hard for a Western to really win me over. But interesting, I was talking to one of our listeners this week who did ask if we could try and include The Unforgiven as our chain movie. And I'm like, well, I'll see what I can do. Unfortunately, spoiler alert, there is no connection between this week's chain movie and Unforgiven. I looked. Yeah. And I linked from Naked Lunch to Spice World. So I couldn't do this one.
You fucker. Well, let's take that as a perfect opportunity to jump into this week's chain movie, which I chose following Richie Grant from Spice World to Can You Ever Forgive Me, which is based on a biography by the main character of this movie, Lee Israel, who is a somewhat successful for a brief period of time.
Previously successful.
Yeah. But we pick up on her in a position where she is really down and out on bad luck, heavy case of writer's block. She's raging alcoholic. And this movie is an interpretation of a biography she wrote about that particular slice of time where she was down on her lowest. She meets the wonderful Richard Grant's character, Jack, and how she actually starts faking these personal letters from famous personalities from the past and selling them, and then the FBI gets involved, and she ultimately gets caught. It's no spoiler, but it's an interesting little slice of an unusual person's life, because this is not like you say the name Lee Israel to the sad person on the street, they're going to go, who? And so it's kind of nice in that biography realm. We've talked about biographies in the past where it's like, for example, the Steve Jobs one with Michael Fassbender, Danny Boyle directed. They took 3 key evenings, whereas the typical biography is like, oh, we're going to tell this person's entire life throughout the course of a movie.
Yeah.
This one, there's no set time frame or timeline on how much time we are with the character of Lee, but it feels relatively short. It feels like maybe 6 months, perhaps.
Yeah.
Something like that, I would say. And it definitely paints you an interesting picture of that. So playing the character of Lee Israel is Melissa McCarthy, who neither of us have really particularly enjoyed her work, so it was going to be a challenge. One of our favorite actors, Richie Grant, essentially kind of bringing in a slightly more balanced version of Withnail.
It's like an older Withnail.
Yeah, and I loved that. It was like seeing an old friend, and I just loved him. Richard,
yeah,
so wonderful. Beyond that, not really got any.
Ben Falcone's the only other name I think you're gonna know. Yeah,
and even then, not in it much.
And the only reason you know him is because he makes awful films with his wife.
Yeah,
Melissa McCarthy.
Yeah, pretty much. So this is a definite tour de force potential. Just looking at the blueprint for this movie for Melissa and Richard. And Richard, I think, fanboy hat on, he does fantastic work. He really knows how to play that the role of the educated drunk Englishman.
I mean, this wasn't a stretch for him. He's played this role before.
Yeah, exactly. But this is Melissa's role, and she really does escape into it, in my opinion. I think she really does a good job of filling the life of Lee Israel. But we very briefly talked about this off air, and my problem with it was I feel like Melissa often does bring in that very sardonic, negative comedy kind of thing to a lot of her characters, and so like, okay, I kind of feel a little bit like you've done this before, but I get it. You're playing this character. Tell me your thoughts.
I completely disagree. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't think I've seen her play a character like this before. I can't think of a recent time I've seen her play a misanthropic character. She normally plays, she's there for laughs. And, if I think of her character in a film like Spy, where I don't know, she might be sarcastic. I mean, certainly sarcastic humor. And if you see her in something like the Gilmore Girls, she was pretty good on the Gilmore Girls, believe it or not.
I have not watched a single episode of Gilmore Girls.
Here's the shock. It's not that bad, actually. It's actually pretty good telly. It's a little bit like I always tell the stories, like when you listen to the Spice Girls and you go, they're awful, until you heard Bewitched, which was the Irish knockoff version of the Spice Girls. And you're like, actually, they weren't that bad. They are awful. So when you see the photocopy of the show, like if you watched Sex and the City original series, like you go, oh, this is just crappy TV for women. You know, it's Mills and Boon television, but it's actually pretty well written. Some of the early stuff, before it became a self parody, really. So the Gilmore Girls, I would file under that as having a reputation as being kind of a TV chick flick, but it's actually pretty good. And she was good in it. I don't know. I can't think of a role where I thought she played a genuinely unlikable, miserable, misanthropic prick of a character. Like, she's a cunt.
Oh, she is utterly unforgivable in this movie. I think that's the hardest part for me for this movie is she's not a nice person, and it is, you know, it takes some balls if this is an adaptation of a biography to be able to paint yourself in such a distasteful manner.
It does, especially as a person who could make a shit ton of money by doing the same thing she does every time. Which is, I'm with you. I think this is an incredible turn for her. She was nominated for an Academy Award for this, and she deserved that nomination. Olivia Colman won this year for The Favourite. I didn't see that, so I don't know. I can't make a comment about whether that was better or anything. But
yeah,
my criticism of Melissa McCarthy is she makes the same film every time. Yeah. She plays the same character in every film, pretty much, which is kind of a snide, sarcastic, smartass. The only time I can think of her not playing that character is this, and in Ghostbusters, where she kind of played the straight man, and that didn't work either. So she makes. I mean, someone say, "Hey, here's $15 million. Go make a film you've made 15 times already, and you can do it with your husband, who you love and have a lot of fun hanging out with."
Yeah,
cool. I'll do that. It takes some balls to take on a character, as you know, who's really, really hard to like and kind of a prick, and like, I don't want to like, a lot of people would be steer clear of it, I think. And I actually really enjoyed her in this. So not to criticize too harshly, I'm sorry.
I think you're actually highlighting the reason why, because she does fill the skin of Lee so completely that she is just, I really don't fucking like her. And so I kind of find it hard to differentiate and just go, oh, I just don't like this person. I really don't. I'm having to hang out with this person for this movie, and I just fucking hate her. And she doesn't get a fucking comeuppance at the end. She doesn't learn anything. She doesn't do anything. It's like, you fucker.
This is why I think I like this film so much.
Yeah.
This is a Seinfeld of films. The motto of Seinfeld was no hugging, no learning. You could. She's almost the female George. Remember, it's not a lie if you believe it. So, I think Lee Israel and I would have been friends, like a fellow misanthrope, a fellow curmudgeon. I tip my hat to you. Not that I would have been engaging in fraud, because my anxiety would fucking kill me. The chances of being caught.
Yes.
So I thought she was outstanding in this, and there were a couple of little moments in this film though that really, for me, made it stand out from the crowd. From other films that sort of tell stories. It kind of made me think of a film like Stranger Than Fiction. The Will Ferrell film where he plays a character in an author story who's, and it was sort of like, oh, he's a comedian and he's doing the Robin Williams thing. But what made this film stand out for me, and a story I thought was a couple of beautiful little moments that really elevated, and they were only small. There's a scene where she's complaining to her superintendent about flies, and he sends it in her apartment, and so he sends an exterminator. And when he turns up, he goes, "Oh, this place stinks." And then even Jack's there with her and says, "Oh no, it smells really bad." And at that moment, we learned something about her that we didn't know previously. We knew she was kind of a loser and kind of washed up. But she's also kind of a shut-in. She's a hoarder almost, like that. She's actually, the house is filthy and disgusting. So she's really let herself, not only her professional life slide, but her personal life slide into, into ruin almost. And there's that really heartwarming moment where she slams the door on him, and Jack bangs on the door and says, "Oh, come on, let me in. I'll help you clean up." And they clean up her disgusting apartment. And I won't turn stomachs by pointing out some of the things that were wrong with the apartment, but he helps her clean up the apartment. And there was a little bit of Whiffnell in that as well, actually. And I was like, that's a really beautiful moment in this story. Like this person, like as somebody who that horrible has made a friend. And it says a lot about Jack's character as well. Yeah,
100%. There was just those moments where I think the other moment for me was when she gets back from her trip and finds a cat, and just beautiful vulnerability there, and not just from Melissa as she just holds the cat, but the way that Jack and Richard plays that scene, and he's out of focus. The focus is on her, and you just see him in the background just there, and it really brings you into her mind and just how world-shattering it is, and the way that he just kind of knows, okay, I've got to go. He doesn't get dressed or anything like that. He just goes. It really just speaks so much on their relationship, and he is an utter fuck up in every way, but he, in his twisted, unusual way, really cares for her, and she has no idea how to kind of
reciprocate.
Yeah, and again, the third beautiful spot of that was after her dinner with the woman from the bookshop, and just how she kind of pulls away. She just doesn't know how to react in these kind of personal moments, and it's just really wonderful.
That was an excellent observation. I'd forgotten about that one, but you're 100% right on that one. The other one that really got to me was at the end of the film, and when she catches up with Jack again for one last time. And maybe I missed the memo somewhere during the film. It's possible. I have the attention span of your garden variety gnat. The internet has destroyed my attention span. But when Jack turns up to meet after they've both been through the justice system, and he turns up to meet Melissa to meet Lee, and he's quite obviously extremely ill, and it sort of instantly you go, oh, he's got AIDS. I don't know if that had been mentioned anywhere else previously in the film. If it might have been hinted at somewhere, and obviously I might have missed it, but at that moment it really becomes stark to me that he's kind of not got long left.
Yeah.
And that conversation between the two of them at that point in time is just beautiful, and that really elevates the film for me.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I don't think there was any mention of AIDS or illness, but the moments when you, like the first time you meet Jack, it's like he kind of, in such a charming way, he forces himself into Lee's evening, and they just get drunk, and then he walks her home, and then he's standing there and he just goes off wandering, and it's like, okay, what's going on with this? And then you kind of, just through the story and just little bits, you kind of hear, all right, he doesn't act, he's homeless, actually.
That was the way I picked the homeless thing, but the AIDS thing was kind of it really took me by, well, he hit me right in the feels, because he's quite a likable character.
Yeah, and I did love as well just the bit where she starts laughing. And she's like, I just resisted every urge to trip you up. Then it's like, that was perfect comment for the relationship that they'd built up. It was fucking on the nose.
It was so on the point for that character. I guess just to sort of take it up a level, what I really appreciated, aside from these little nice little beautiful moments, because was that they're not playing these characters for laughs. We aren't laughing at these people.
No.
This isn't her character in Bridesmaids is kind of pathetic, I think. And has very low self-respect. And that's played for laughs by Paul Feig. these people we're not laughing at these people. And more than that, it's just kind of a crime film, I guess. It's kind of a she's committing fraud, as you noted, to make money. But we don't ever get down in detail that there's one sort of moment where she tries to someone tries to extort her for money, but that kind of just sort of goes away.
Yeah.
The film seems more interested in why she's doing this, why she is the way she is, her psychology, her mindset, as opposed to what she's doing. You know, what she's doing is mildly interesting. Why she's doing it is really fucking interesting.
Yeah, absolutely agree. It's this movie just was consistently making me think and consider, and I think this is a prime example of what we have always just preached about: make compelling characters. And in spite of the fact that I fucking hate the character of Lee, and it was torturous to watch her, it was a joy to see that performance. But it was all about character. I didn't actually particularly care. Like, the only one of the famous people that she stole from that I know of was Noel Coward. And it's like, okay, I have very little reference to any of this. The sort of like the book selling and stuff is like, I don't know that world, but this is a compelling character. The Jack character is compelling. Their relationship is compelling. And that was more than enough for this movie. They didn't need to go into, like, the FBI stuff was just kind of peppered in, and then it was sort of like, it just happens. And it's like, okay, we're going to follow Lee through how this happens. And even just the little moments, her reactions, where she goes to the different buyers and sort of like, oh, you've been put on a list. Just the look on her face, you can see that kind of, she plays it so well of, oh fuck, I've been caught, to, and that morphs and just twists and mutates into, what am I going to fucking do now? I need money. And she plays it really, really well.
Her speech to the judge after she pleads guilty is amazing. Like, it's I think it's one of the better, like, it's kind of a trope in films, right? Like, you know, the accused, you know, is, you know, heartfelt speech to the judge for mercy. It's a real different kind of heartfelt speech for mercy in this one, in the sense she really actually, for the first time in the film, shows some insight into her character, into her pathology. Yeah.
And I don't know whether it was accurate or if this was just a tool that she used in her own biography, but what's her, the woman who played her agent, she was in Third Rock from the Sun.
Jane Curtin.
Yes, she plays Lee's agent, and she talks about how the personality of Lee, and this whole movie is essentially putting the character of the personality of Lee through the most ultimate ringer to actually get her to confront herself. And that speech that she delivers is the first opening moment. And then eventually when you do hear, oh, she wants to write a book about that, and she asks Jack, she reconciles with Jack for permission to do it. It's what Jane was asking her to do from the very beginning. He's kind of like, oh, if you'd just been able to be honest with yourself so much sooner, God, you would have avoided such a scenario.
I think it was probably one of the films of the year for me. I know it came out a couple of years ago, but
it's a phenomenal movie. It's hard to watch because she's not a likable character, and it's not a redemptive arc. She doesn't learn anything, as Trav said. It's the Seinfeld school of, nope, we're not giving you what you want. You're going to get what you're going to have, what you have. It works, but it's challenging watching. It's challenging.
It won't be for everyone. Like, if you need to fall in love with your lead character, your protagonist, you're probably going to struggle here. I'm like you. I had shamefully never heard of most of the people apart from Noel Coward. So again, if you're really not into that kind of world, you might struggle a little bit. But I think you've got two avowed people who are quite critical of a lot of Melissa McCarthy's work here, who, at least speaking for you, but definitely hats off for me for really pushing it. And I would like to see her do this more. You've got some talent there, woman. Get out there, take on some challenging roles. Again, one last note here. This is a queer film, by the way, in case you're wondering. So if you're interested, and it's on Disney, Disney Plus, and this is 100% a queer film in the sense that both of the lead characters are gay.
Yes.
So again, if for some reason you have a problem with that, be aware of it, and probably don't watch this anymore because fuck off.
Absolutely.
But it's worth noting. But I kind of like that about it as well, in a sense. Both of it. I mean, I haven't actually raved about Richie Grant. I think you did that for me. Thank you. Fuck, he's good. He's so fucking good.
Yeah.
I just want to put him on a biscuit and you play it and leave him up with a biscuit. He's so good. He's so good. Maybe put a line of him on a $3 Kmart plate and snort him up like Nadia Bartel. He's so good. I can't get enough. And but also to have two complex, interesting lead characters, both gay. This is representation at its best.
Yes, and kind of like what I was sort of like lauding for The Harder They Fall, about utilizing just the legitimate character history to inform the characters and inform the audience without having these diatribes or these sort of like paint by numbers. Oh, this is what you need to know about this character. It's just eked out just simply throughout. There's never explicitly fuck off, I'm gay or anything like that. It's just through their genuine interactions that it's just part and parcel of their day-to-day life. And it's wonderful. It's not highlighted as, oh, look what we're including or anything like that. It's just, you get it, and it's like,
and
cool.
It's subtly included too. I mean, is it we learn when Jack's gay by saying you're having drinks? He says, "I thought aren't you a fag?" And I think later on, the only time I really put together that she was gay, when she started to show interest in, I think she said at one point, "my wife" or "my girlfriend." I can't remember exactly the line, something like that. And you're like, "Oh, okay, she's gay."
Yeah.
And it's kind of sometimes how you find out about people in your life are gay. You're like, they're just talking and they say, "Oh, my wife, my girlfriend, my boyfriend, my husband, whatever," and you're like, "Oh, okay." So, I didn't know they were gay because my gaydar wasn't good enough. Or like, I had my feelings, but, I wasn't gonna, be that guy. Like, so it was subtly done and intelligently done. Probably, I don't know if it's in the source material where we give credit to the writers here. The writers here were Jeff Whitty and Nicole Holofcener. Nicole Holofcener, who we talked about last week, wrote part of The Last Duel. So she's a very fine writer, I think. Yeah.
Just looking at the director, Marielle Heller, she not done too much directing stuff. She's known for The Diary of a Teenage Girl, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. That's probably her biggest thing. A Walk Among the Tombstones with.
I think she's also an actress because she was in The Queen's Gambit.
So I think this was actually a really strong outing, which I'm now curious to watch. Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. It's Tom Hanks
playing Mr. Rogers.
Being Mr. Rogers is like, okay, that's probably not going to be much of a stretch for him because Tom Hanks seems to be a really, really nice guy. Mr. Rogers is like the ultimate nice guy.
And I should also note, it's also a really impressive performance from her considering the state of this project when she took over. Originally, this film was to be directed by the writer, Nicole Holofcener. I'm probably murdering her name, so I apologize to anybody, to all of the Holofceners out there in the world. And it was supposed to star Julianne Moore in the Melissa McCarthy role. And apparently there was a bit of friction between those two, the director and the star, about how to play the role. And the director fired Julianne Moore. That's kind of a big call for, an up-and-coming
Oscar-winning actress like that. That's ballsy.
Nicole Holderson has been around a while. She's 61 herself. She's been in the industry for a long time, but not exactly a household name. So big call. I don't know exactly what happened after that, but then he obviously got retooled as a Melissa McCarthy project after Ben Falcone brought her in on this project, who was already cast. And then Marielle Heller picked it up. So I can't imagine it was necessarily in the best state. That's probably quite a challenging situation to pick up a project in. Yeah, and she deserves all the credit in the world for making a really wonderful fist of it.
Just looking at this, apparently, according to Richard Grant, when the project was first in development, Sam Rockwell and Chris O'Dowd were originally cast in the role he plays. Which
two people?
Yeah, apparently that's what it says here.
Yeah, so one of us an either or they're going to be. I don't know. Interesting.
Maybe, but we're unapologetic Sam Rockwell fans, and he probably would have done a fantastic job. And Chris O'Dowd has proven that he's got some good acting chops on him. But after seeing Richard in this role,
it's hard to imagine, right? Yeah. When you see somebody really nail something, it's like when you read that originally Hannibal Lecter was supposed to be played by Gene Hackman.
That's such
and you're like, hey, look, Gene Hackman, one of the all-time greats. He would have probably done something interesting with it, but it's hard to imagine. He would have looked like Lex Luthor in Behind the Glass Case. Hello,
Superman. Clarice.
So it's once you see someone make the role of their own, it's always very hard to go back and see who it could have been.
Yeah. So, question: where are we going to next?
I did consider A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood because I have a copy of it here, and I've been curious to see it. I've decided not to go that way. Okay. I have taken mercy on Your Eternal Soul as well. I did consider making a controversial choice and revisiting perhaps one of the sort of pillars of this show, a thing that we constantly reference here, being the 2016 Ghostbusters reboot starring Melissa McCarthy. I'm like, what does it look like 5 years later? Is it still that bad? How hard will we too hard on it? Because there are people out there I meet all the time and go, I thought it was a genuinely funny movie. And I'm like, I remember you and I on a television show, we said, well, that just happened. And I laughed once in the entire film.
Right at the beginning.
In the beginning. And but no, I would have to do that too. So you're welcome.
I gave you a lovely movie.
You did, and that's why I thought this is the season of peace between men. So I'm going to go with a different choice. I'm going to go way back. We're going to follow Melissa McCarthy.
Okay.
But we're going back to the start of her career.
Oh.
We are going back to 1999 and the sort of rave crime film Go.
Oh, shit. Serious?
She played Sandra, apparently, in that film. I don't remember Sandra, but she's in it.
Oh, no.
And it's, of course, is the Doug Liman drug deal multiple point of view film. It was really hot at the time, starring Sarah Polley, Jay Moore, Taye Diggs, Scott Wolf, Katie Holmes, Timothy Olyphant, William Fichtner.
Maybe since it was released.
I'm saying here, this is what my choice of this one is that
Jesus.
I remember really liking this film when it came out. And it kind of had it was kind of Tarantino light.
Yeah.
And that was very trendy in the late 90s. Yeah. But also I remember it made a big deal out of the fact that it used real rave footage. It had a really kick-ass soundtrack, I think, from memory. That's right. And then, that electronic sound was kind of really hot at the time. And I remember going and seeing it and going, I liked that. You can see it and go, it's Tarantino light, but I still had fun with it. But I'm like, what does this film look like 22 years later?
Yeah. Wow. And where are we watching this?
You can stream it. You can rent it on the Google Plays, the YouTubes, the Apple TVs, the Microsofts. You can also buy it for most places if you're so inclined.
Okay. All right. Cool. All right. Well, that is our link in the chain for Chain movie. That's kind of merciful. It could be good. I liked it when it came out. It's going to be a bit dated, but you should have a fair few easy exits from that one.
if you want to go and watch, I think Scott Wolf was in a film called White Squall or something stupid like that from back in the day.
God, no, I am not going back to watch White Squall. I remember watching that, and no, it's just
Double Dragon it is then.
No, you don't get to choose for me.
He was Scott Wolf was popular once upon a time, ladies and gentlemen. If you don't remember, he was kind of the it boy in the mid-90s.
Oh, I think I know which route we're going to go, but I'm not going to tell you what it is. Ooh, yeah, I already know what we're going to next.
So many possible options out of this one, but I'm going to look forward to sort of revisiting my youth and remembering when I used to think rave music was palatable.
Now, was there anything else that we wanted to talk about? Or are we going to have a slightly shorter show this week?
I think we should be a little bit merciful. It's only 10 minutes short of 2 hours, so it's a chunky show. It's about where we try to keep it. Yeah. But we should say Merry Christmas and Happy Hanukkah, Happy Festivus, a crazy Kwanzaa, whatever it is you choose to celebrate.
Or not celebrate if you're like me and hate Christmas because retail killed it for you for 20-odd years.
How many times have you heard Mariah Carey this season?
Fortunately, none, but I have heard 1 billion times too many Pokemon-themed Christmas songs.
There are Pokemon-themed Christmas songs?
Yep. Oh,
yikes.
Caterpie, I hope you come, my Butterfree.
Okay. No, I think I felt better about 5 minutes ago before I knew that existed.
Yeah, well, if you want to hear worse, just check out Lady Gaga's Christmas song.
Let's not say we did.
Yeah, that is the healthier option. Because it would genuinely hurt your soul.
It just opens up so many possibilities for really horrible fandom Christmas songs. Like, there's a whole subgenre of rave techno music for bronies. And you just know that
I don't.
Christmas music.
Christmas music is bad, regardless of who you are. There are a couple of classics, but then people just keep remaking them, and they're horrible and they're foul and done. No more.
Here we go. So, do they know it's Christmas? A massive brony collab. So, it's a thing.
On that note, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Good night.
We'll leave it at that. You don't want to go down that rabbit hole. That's a bit creepy. Thank you for listening this year. Thank you for watching this year. I don't know if we'll be back next week. It kind of depends on what your Boxing Day sales look like. Do you survive?
Am I in jail?
Yeah. Have you beaten anybody to death? Have you been beaten to death? That sort of thing. If we don't see you next week, again, thank you for your attention, your suggestions. For people who drop into the stream from time to time, thank you. Cara Kitty, the other guy was people who you know who you are. It happens so rarely. I should remember all the names. But Judy kept coming in and telling us
our secret number one fan, Mr. Donald Trump.
Mr. Donald Trump, the weird guy who kept coming in and making comments about the flying high posters.
Yes.
I don't know what was up with that dude, but that was seriously good material.
Yeah, he kept that going. He really did.
For weeks.
Yeah. But honestly, thank you everyone, ladies and gentlemen. You are wonderful. You are not the reason we do the show, but you certainly make it far more enjoyable.
Absolutely.
Nothing else to do.
So on that note, I should say good night.
Good night.